Mathis here. Hope everybody's been doing well. As you know, a few months ago, I ended up moving a very far distance across the country, and that included moving all of my stuff over the course of time. I got my office here stuff first and all the important stuff so I could get up and running, but not everything could come with me immediately. And one of the things I had to leave behind, at least temporarily, was my big game PC collection, specifically my big box PC collection and my SNES collection. And both of those are currently mostly sitting in my mom's house back in New England. But recently, I've started having her shipping me my collection piece by piece. And in the process, I built myself a brand new bookshelf. And instead of just picking everything out of the box and sliding it on the shelf, I thought it would be really fun to go box by box in a video each time and just pull the collection out and show you what I have and talk about maybe where I got it and what the game is like if I know anything about it, and maybe just my history with it before it all goes up on that shelf, serving two purposes in the meanwhile. One, I get to have fun, talk about it because it's super fun, but two, I also get to properly catalog my own collection. I actually haven't really cataloged my collection since I've started collecting a couple years back, and it's gotten to the point where now I'm not sure if I have a game or not when I see a game I want out in public or on eBay, and I want to make sure I have it cataloged. So if you're a collector too, if you have suggestions as to which game cataloging apps would be good, let me know in the comment section below. I'm going to be using GameEye for now, but I know there are tons and tons of other ones out there. That being said, let's just dive into the first box here, talk about what I got and sitting on top, and get it up on the shelf so I can look at it when I walk in every day. So sitting right at the very top is Ultimate Spider-Man. So if you are at all a fan of superhero games now with Spider-Man open world games and the like, this is really not where it all began, but this is the type of game that those games sprouted from, so to speak. Technically, this was the third Spider-Man game after the movie ones had started. And this was an open world game where you played in the Ultimate Spider-Man universe, and in that you actually got to go back and forth between playing Peter Parker and Eddie Brock as Venom. You had really cool cameos through the game. Wolverine showed up at some point, the Human Torch showed up, and the stylized cel-shaded graphics of this game presented in a comic book fashion was really cool. I really enjoyed this game a lot. I still don't think it's as good as Spider-Man 2 from back in that time, but it was still a really fun Spider-Man game. And if you've beaten the most recent ones and want to try something older, Ultimate Spider-Man is a really good one to try. Next up is a series that is beloved to me. This one in particular I actually never played, but the box is a little fragile here. And this is Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven. This is back in the day when Might and Magic wasn't the strategy game that you know it to be now, but was that old school first-person grid-based RPG style game. The most modern kind of companion I can think of is Legend of Grimrock. So if you've ever played or seen the Legend of Grimrock kind of games, that's the kind of game Might and Magic used to be back in the day. Luckily, this was one of the ones sent by a fan. Many of my original start and bulk of my collection was sent by a fan. One in particular, shout out to you, man. Thank you so much for sending me that stuff back in the day. And this is just a really cool piece of the collection. It has some really neat stuff in it, like a giant piece of art, a giant map. Here, I'll take out one thing here and show it off. This right here is a cloth map of the world, which is super neat, and this is one of the reasons I love collecting big box PC games in the first place. Having games that have these neat little feelies, they used to be called, in them, back from when I was a kid and stuff, this was so cool and it was so immersive. It really, for me anyway, brought the world to life. It really made it feel like the world was tangible in some way, that I was going to be a part of it in some way, that there was a great, amazing story to be told. That's the stuff that really drove me and still drives me to this day with my love of story-like games. Now this one's another fragile box that I found back at a half-price books. I want to say it was 2018, and it's not even a full game. It's a mission pack for a full game. This is, and you can see the price right on it that I bought it for, the Hexan 2 mission pack. If you don't know what Hexan is, Hexan is Doom with wizard magic from back in the day. Same idea, you're seeing some gameplay right now. This was a mission pack because back in the day, you know, DLC didn't really exist. No expansion packs were super rare, but these games, these first-person games, had a lot of modability and development to them, and you could still create all kinds of new levels. You would get, back then in the 90s and stuff, third-party level packs that you could find at game stores and stuff. Now this one is, at the very least, developed by Ravensoft, which you may know from a couple of games. The one I'm thinking of is the Wolverine one from back in the 360 era, published by Activision, so it's an official one. And it genuinely was just more levels, more missions, more of the game that people loved and wanted to play. And this was pretty common practice back then because, again, there was no way to get more content to people who wanted it other than to physically release it. So grabbing a piece of this is like owning a small piece of obscure, weird history in gaming. I love it. Now this game, I don't actually know all that much about, and actually came from, as a gift from none other than Dean himself. Zeus, Masters of Olympus. And in the middle of the manual, we have the game here, as you can see. And this is a city building kind of RTS style game from my understanding. Again, you're seeing gameplay of it now. I have never played this game. And the reason I say you might see more of it in the near or somewhat near future is because I know Dean wants to cover this game at some point. I would love to play it at some point. I will likely be playing it at some point, especially now that it's being unpacked and stuff. But this is just one of those games that comes from Sierra that I'd heard of, but just never tried. And if you don't know who Sierra is, leave my channel, please. Another one that I ended up getting in a half-price books back around the same time as I got the last one is Dungeons & Dragons and the Temple of Elemental Evil. Another classic and the very last game these developers ever made before they went out. This was a developer that I have very, very fond memories of that we'll talk of a little bit. This is Troika. If you don't know who Troika is, we'll talk about them shortly because I can see the other game that they developed that I love in the box. But this is a top-down isometric D&D RPG in the 3.5 rule set, right around when the 3.5 rule set was coming out, or it came out. I don't know for sure. It took place in the Greyhawk setting. If you don't know what that is, that's like your default D&D setting. Not Faerun, not Eberron. Greyhawk was like default zone where the original game took place before these other campaign settings came out. A very, very good game. One I definitely want to cover on the channel at some point. Oh, let's round out the Troika one that I was talking about, and let's talk about one of my favorite RPGs of all time. The game that literally was the reason I started the Judge Mathis series way back in the day. It hasn't been a few years now. And that is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Never mind my love for the World of Darkness and its dark fantasy set in kind of a modern day setting, but this game was just ahead of its time in a lot of its RPG and story influencing like decisions. This was all about how you were telling your story, what you were deciding to do, and what your decisions ended up doing to the city by the end of the game. And it was replayable. The game wasn't that long, maybe 15, 16 hours all told. And there was a class, well, they're called clans, but I'm going to call them a class for the sake of understanding for those who may not know this game, called Malkavian. And they have a thing where they are kind of crazy and see things that may or may not be there, telling them truths that may or may not be real. And if you play through a second time as a Malkavian, the entire dialogue of the entire game is changed. The story is the same, obviously, but you're getting insights and things that make more sense the second time around and piecing things together that you might not have been able to when you played the first time around. And dare I say, the ending of this game, the very end, fans know what I'm talking about, is just such a sweet little treat, a nice, delectable Easter egg for vampire fans. I'm gonna do a couple here on this one that are a little more modern. First I'm gonna do is Grand Theft Auto 5. This one's modern. I don't need to talk about Grand Theft Auto 5. It is a remarkable game. It is a genre-defining game. It is still insanely popular 8 years after its launch or whatever it's been at this point. I saw this at Target when there was very, very few of them at the time. And I just wanted to grab it before they ran out. I don't know if they still have this on shelves, this version of it. I imagine they probably do, but it is what it is. And another Target venture that they were selling, they were getting rid of, they were on clearance, and there's only one left, was the Elder Scrolls Anthology. This is just a really convenient, tight package of games to own. It's every game that Bethesda has made in the mainline, and I mean that to say that on purpose, the mainline Elder Scrolls series. So it has Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, but none of the side games that have been made over the course of Bethesda's development history. I'm just happy to have it, and it has a really cool packaging delivery. I never opened this one though. So this is a game that we've already actually, if you've been following rather, the Judge Mathis series in any capacity, you've seen. We've done a video on this one already. One of the most fun, if a little obscure sometimes, point and click adventures from towards the end of the point and click adventures kind of run as the dominant game in the PC sphere. They were still very, very popular for a while yet, but this is around the time where we started seeing other games, I think, really dominating and the point and click adventure just starting to go by the wayside. Regardless, if you're a horror game or into some really creepy kind of weird stories, or just, you know, looking for maybe a horror game to play during the spooky season you've never played before, I urge you to check out Sanitarium. There's a lot of good stuff here, and there's a lot of cool twists and turns that really just creep you the hell out. It's a really good horror game. Check out Sanitarium if you can. This is a game I haven't played, but is a genre of game that I thoroughly enjoy. And while I may not have played this one back in the day, I did play a lot of games similar to it, and that is F19 Stealth Fighter, a grandpa game. This is an old school flight simulator. If you could take a look at the back, or if you get to see if you see some gameplay right now, you can immediately tell that this thing is from another era. But these games were rather big back in the day and really have maintained their audience in modern day and have only gotten better and more interesting and complicated. While I don't know much about this particular game, the flight sim genre was booming in the 90s on PC gaming. Here's a couple of them that I actually am just going to kind of put together. While they're not from the same franchises, they are similar in what they're trying to do. First is Operation Flashpoint. Cold War Crisis, again, kind of falls into that grandpa game category. This is another one I believe that kind of came with that collection that fan sent about a couple years ago now. Has a gatefold flap, which is surprising, but it is kind of like, from what I can tell, again, it's not one that I've played. It looks sort of like a hyper-realistic kind of Rainbow Six, a Tom Clancy game before Tom Clancy went the route of like movie action and Hollywood action. Which brings me to my next game, an old Tom Clancy game called Politica. This is before Tom Clancy went the way of action or stealth action games, and this is like a grand strategy political game. Very, very rare to hear of a game like this nowadays from the Tom Clancy universe. But they were trying all kinds of different things, trying to adapt his novels into all kinds of different genres of game. And this is one that interests me because I friggin' love grand strategy games. I've played so many of them, but I had never heard of this until I got this into my hands. And one that I think we'll definitely see either a Judge Mathis on, or at the very least a Judge Mathis of weird, obscure, more unique Tom Clancy games under the Tom Clancy umbrella. Very quickly, a few clamshell PC games. Clamshell are the kind of box and stuff that they shipped PC games in the early 2000s and then kind of towards the mid 2000s before they became like boxed digital downloads. If you were around for my Legacy of Kain marathon, obviously Legacy of Kain Defiance, phenomenal game. Does that kind of Batman Arkham style combat in a rough way before the Batman Arkham games even existed. And even though it leaves on kind of a cliffhanger, there's a really cool little story involved in this game. I loved it. Not my favorite of the series, but it's still really, really good. Next up is Company of Heroes. Rather topical now that Company of Heroes 3 has been announced. One of the most classic RTS games to ever exist. If you love RTSs and never played Company of Heroes, go play it. It's a great World War II RTS game by Relic. Relic are such good devs, and I'm really excited to see what Company of Heroes 3 is going to be like. And then we also did this on a Judge Mathis a little while back, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, a physics-based first-person action-adventure fantasy game that was based on Valve's engine, one of the earliest iterations of Valve's engine. So there's a lot of physics-based puzzles, physics-based combat. Being able to like boot and kick enemies off ledges into spikes was always satisfying throughout the whole game. And while it is imperfect in many, many ways, this is a game I would love to see more of, or just another one in this world with that same gritty, gruesome kind of hyper realistic combat. It would be great. Another one that we've covered on the channel before, Evil Genius. Evil Genius 2 came out and I had a really good time with it. Obviously we did some paid promo videos for it here on the channel, but at the same time, it was still a very enjoyable sequel to a very enjoyable game that is very Dungeon Master in its philosophy and its design. If you love management games and Sims and building giant evil layers, check out Evil Genius 1 or 2. They're both really fun. Now, this is a game that I remember playing as a kid. In the late 90s on the family computer, my dad owned it and I could never get too far, but I loved trying. Star Trek Bridge Commander. This is a game I want to see a friggin' modern day sequel, spiritual successor, whatever you want to call it of, because this was like the Star Trek game of my dreams. You got to be the captain of the Enterprise, first person, you're commanding people to raise, lower shields, who to fire on, doing diplomatic interactions. You get to look around the bridge. You get to move, talk to people as the camera moves around. This was the game that made me at the time feel like an actual captain of a Star Trek ship. And you know, finding a game like that nowadays is still really hard. Maybe Elite Dangerous is kind of the closest, but with the level of NPC interaction and stuff, you just don't really have that anymore. I would love to see a flight sim game with deep Obsidian or BioWare RPG mechanics built into this kind of game where you are genuinely not really partaking in the action directly, but just directing the crew so that you can get through. It is an awesome experience, and for any Star Trek fan, well worth it. Last of the small boxes, I keep thinking I'm out of them, that I keep seeing one more. This is Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen 2. Again, go check out my full video if you want to know my full thoughts on this one. This was a missed opportunity in a lot of ways. Some unique ideas and some interesting ways that they went about trying to change up the formula of these games. But the development history in this game is rough, and it really shows in the final product. Again, it's not a terrible game, and if you're gonna play through the Legacy of Kain games, I urge you to play at least all of them one time. But at the end, I think you'll only ever play Blood Omen 2 one time. So these two are really kind of bizarre little PC games. I own them more because the box grabbed my attention than the actual game, but it comes with the era that these games come from, so know that ahead of time. The first is Heavy Metal Pack 2. The game's box art to its own talking. This is a game that this came out in the year 2000, and this game, like, let me give you some of the hot lines in the back. A top 10 game from 2000. That's from PC Gamer. One of the hottest games for 2000, Computer Gaming World. The sexy video game of the year from Details, and stunning. The visuals were amazingly vibrant, the models and animation were terrific, and the game practically oozed style by GameSpy. And then the last one, the best looking Quake 3 game yet. I imagine it probably uses a similar engine, but as you can tell, it's just an action game. It is all about beating up demonic monsters as a sexy rocker chick. It looks insane. I have never played it. This is just a weird box, and the hollow foil kind of cover is unique in itself and really interesting, but still, I haven't played it. The same kind of goes with this one, the fact that I haven't played it. Odium. This is actually by Monolith. Some of you may actually know that name nowadays. They did create a good chunk of games back in the day, but Odium was like an XCOM style turn-based tactic game. There's not a lot of, I haven't seen a lot of footage of this game out there. The fact that it was a turn-based tactics game is what drew me. And this is a sealed copy, and this actually I got technically for free from an eBay purchaser, where if you had bought X number of games, he was going to throw in one of his games randomly for free. And so I bought a few of his games that I wanted, and he threw in a sealed copy of Odium, which, hey man, I appreciate it. It still has that free phone card sticker on it, which I love. Yeah, this game is man, 21 years old now, and still in its wrapping. That's cool. Next up, another Tom Clancy game. This was a sequel to Rainbow Six Rogue Spear. Played this back in the day. I want to say it was on the Dreamcast. I played this one on the Dreamcast. Didn't translate all super well, but your tactical first-person shooter, typical Tom Clancy affair. working and ordering your NPC companions around, kind of calling the shots and trying to infiltrate enemy bases and stuff as professionally, quietly, and as least dangerously as you can. I mean, old school Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six as well. Like, old school Tom Clancy games are far and away from what they are now. They are, nowadays, they're way more arcadey than they used to be. They used to really strive for kind of a simulation feel. This one here, another one I haven't tried yet, but I have heard some good things about, and this is called Kingpin, Life of Crime. This is another kind of RPG third-person action game. There's stats and gear management, some like in-street brawls, but very similar to games around this era, early 2000s, late 90s. The back is really hard to tell what's going on. It's really, you can see some screenshots, but there's not a lot of info actually as to what's the game's actually about. It's just kind of like a lot of flavor text. Also, warning, violent subject matter, everybody. It came with a giant warning sticker, and you get $30 off a Maxi Gamer Zentor 32, which is, I think, a graphics card. How exciting. It's got a lot of stuff on it. It's opened. It still has a cellophane wrap on it, but the person who owned it originally only peeled back the very top, so a lot of the box is still protected, and I'm trying to keep it that way. Everybody needs to own a Worms game, right? I want to own all of them at some point in box, but Worms Armageddon, it's Worms. If you've never played Worms, here's some gameplay of Worms. Does it look familiar? You know Worms. Plenty of games have ripped off Worms in the past. This is a fun game to play with friends. I struggle to remember what's so unique about Armageddon because a lot of the Worms games are very similar, but Worms, it's fun. It's a multiplayer bash, kind of turn-based combat game. Play it. It's a great time even today. Now, this is another Star Trek game, but instead of being on the bridge of this one, you're commanding an entire fleet. It's an RTS, a real-time strategy game inspired by Starfleet battles. This is Star Trek Starfleet Command. This is a game I played a demo of back in the day. I vaguely recall playing it, and I remember having a pretty decent time with it. I do plan on actually playing through it fully and doing a Judge Mathis on it at some point because I love Star Trek, and Star Trek games are wildly hit and miss. But this version of it, another eBay purchase of mine, I got it just because of what good condition this thing was in. And upon receiving it, they shipped it really, really well. And the box is in incredible condition, and it's complete. It's a complete in-box purchase, has everything that this thing would have come with upon launch. And just to have another Star Trek game in my collection is exciting because I just love Star Trek. All right, we're down to the final three of this box. We're gonna start with another one that I did a video on, Freddy Fish and the Case of the Missing Kelp Seeds. This is completely sealed. This is a childhood memory for me. I was a little too old for this to be a challenge when it came out. However, my brother and my sister, both younger, weren't really, and we played this all the time. I mean, I was probably like 9 when this thing came out. It's very simple. It's a point-and-click adventure by Humongous Games, but this just means a lot to me. I can't tell you the number of times I played through this with my siblings over the years as a kid. We were just, you know, happy, fun memories. And I found one that was sealed on eBay, and I had to get it. I'm gonna keep it sealed. Kind of just a memory thing. I'm not a big person that keeps everything or wants everything sealed, but there are certain games that sealed is kind of the way I would prefer them. And this one is like a preferred way of keeping a childhood memory, you know, safe from dust and stuff. It's weird, but. Now this one I played on the, I want to say it was the PlayStation 2 that it came out as well, MDK2. This is a third-person action-adventure platforming game by Interplay and developed by BioWare. Early BioWare before they became the RPG juggernaut that they became and their inevitable downfall in recent years. But MDK is hard to explain. So hopefully the gameplay is doing a good job of showing you what the moment-to-moment action is like, but the story and the weirdness of it is something to be experienced. This is a wild game, 1 and 2. And if you like action adventure puzzle platformers, check it out. It's good. It's just weird. It's just weird. I mean, look at the cover, dude. And last but not least, another one we covered, the very first one we covered in the Legacy of Kain run through on the channel, and that's Blood Omen, the Legacy of Kain. Now I have there's a few games in my collection I had a really hard time finding as I was looking for them, especially as I was looking for them specifically. I knew I wanted to do this game. I knew I wanted to play the PC version, which I knew there was an existence of. I just couldn't find it. I eventually was able to find this thing, not on eBay, not in real life anywhere, not through a friend, but through a third-party seller on Amazon. The only copy complete in box I could find where the box was not completely destroyed and it had everything in it. I am so thankful that those people were selling them because I was so desperately looking for this game. And it's just cool to have the Legacy of Kain Blood Omen, the original one, in big box PC, because that's not where it was most popular. It was most popular on the PlayStation 1. Everybody has a PlayStation 1 copy, but a PC copy, this is relatively unique and I really love it. The box is gorgeous. The back is clear and beautiful. Great screenshots of already still pretty good looking top-down kind of action game. Really, it's a great box. It's a great game. And if you are okay dealing with more retro style design decisions in the PlayStation 1 era, you have to check this game out. The story that the 5 games that follow after all this tell, it's one of the best. Time traveling vampires, dude. Time traveling vampires. It's sick. And that wraps it up. That's all I got for the first box, the biggest of the 3 boxes I had. I'm gonna go put these up on the shelf now. I thank you guys for allowing me to ramble and talk about games like this and show the boxes off. If we ever want to do more deeper dives into maybe opening some of these boxes and like looking at the feelies, let me know. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm gonna do more of this kind of thing on the channel. More structured videos like this and some scripted ones like Judge Mathis. This is going to be the more of the Mathis I think you guys get going forward. Thank you guys so much for your support, and thank you again for everybody who allows me to do this. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you in the next unboxing video. Goodbye.